Hey guys, this is Ben, and in this video what we're going to do is go through a classic proof of a creator, God, for teenagers. So hopefully this will be something that any teenager could easily follow and it'll make sense to you. So let's just jump right into it. And what we're going to do is simple. This is just logical reasoning. And so when we talk about a creator or creation, what I mean is a question of the beginning of the world. So we're asking ourselves about a beginning. And so first of all, there's one option. We could say the world had a beginning. So the world had a beginning. Another option would be, nope, there was no beginning, or more specifically, well, it either had a beginning or it didn't, right? But there's two ways it could have had no beginning. It could be eternally old, so just an infinite past going back forever and ever, or it could be what's called and this is the view that I've noticed a lot of teenagers tend to think, time, they always say this, time is an illusion. That's the one that a lot of teenagers go for, that one right there. They think time is an illusion. So first thing we got to do is we got to narrow it down to this, does the world even have a beginning or not? Could it be eternally old? Could there be no such thing as time? Or has time been going only for so long? Does the world itself, the universe, have a birthday? Okay, so first of all, this illusion of time, most teenagers struggle with what's called a semantic argument. And so what they'll tell you is, the word second, or the word minute, or the word hour, those are man-made, and so time is a man-made idea, and so there's no such thing as time. Time is made up. Okay, well, the problem with the way they're reasoning is they don't understand that that's purely a semantic point, which just means it's just a point about the words. So we could have called seconds, hooba-joobas, and who would have cared, So one of the plays that hopefully you're required to, when I was in high school, and hopefully everyone in high school has to learn or read or be exposed to one of Shakespeare's plays every year. Alright, so in the play Romeo and Juliet, if you remember, Juliet says, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" Okay, so that's written in King James English, Shakespearean, Elizabethan English. Wherefore means, Romeo, Romeo, why are you Romeo? And what she's saying is, they can't be together because he's in the wrong family. And her point is, if he just had a different name, we could be together. And she makes another point, or really Shakespeare makes a point, because Romeo and Juliet are imaginary, but Shakespeare's real, is a rose by any other name would smell exactly the same. And so this is a classic point from Romeo and Juliet. Of course, a lot of people have known it, and it's usually something that high school teachers consider important. Now, to help drive this point home, I'm going to grab something here. And here we have a dumbbell. This dumbbell, these weight plates, the word dumbbell or the word weight plates is a man-made word. So therefore, weights are an illusion, right? And if you were to lay on the ground and I was just going to drop this on your face, it wouldn't actually hurt your face, right? Because there's no such thing as weights, because weights are just an illusion, right? Of course not. So that semantic point is obviously wrong. Now there is a view that time is an illusion, and that's something called the B theory or the block theory of time. And the block theory of time works like this. And it's going to be important for us to understand this block theory because it's going to come up later, and it's going to be really important as we go through all of this. So when it comes to the block theory of time, let's think of it, let's ignore the block theory, and there's the main theory of time is called tense time. And so it works like this. Here's, we'll do me. I was born in 1981, okay? You move forward in time to today, and it's the year 2020. Okay, and then you can go forward in the future, and of course I'm going to live to be, 1,000 years old. So in 2981, I'll be 1,000 years old, right? Okay. So here's me. And on the tense theory of time, I exist today. And the past no longer is present. I am not present in 1981, and I am not present in 2981. I am only present today, right now, this moment in 2020. And that's the tense theory of time. That is most people's view of time, that, it's today, and that's the only time in which is actually present is today or right now, and that the past days are gone. And then there's future days that are not yet present but will one day be present. And that's the normal theory of time, or tense time, or what's sometimes abbreviated as the A theory of time. The block theory of time, or what's called the B theory of time, it's a little different. The block theory of time says that, hey Ben, my name's Ben, you're actually there right now. You are currently present at all points in time. So I'm there in 2981, I'm there in 1981, I'm there in 2020, and I'm there at all times. And the same thing would go for you. And that's the block theory of time. That it's the idea that time is an illusion. The idea that time passes, and that this morning you were eating breakfast, and now that's past, and now you're watching this video, and tomorrow you will eat another breakfast. That all of that is an illusion, and all of those things are actually happening at the same time, and they're all currently present forever and always. And that's the block theory of time. Pretty wild, huh? Well, if you're going to go around saying that time is an illusion, you're going to get pretty wild, right? So this block theory of time, it's important for us to understand that all that matters for us, for this logical proof for God's existence, is just, that starts with the question of, is time an illusion? Even if I am present at all these times, I am still moving through the block, and I am experiencing only one day at a time. I'm only experiencing the present, and as long as there's this movement through the block, that works for us. That's all that needs to, it could be true that, I'm not aware of my presence at all times, doesn't really matter. You can just ignore it and just understand that even if time is an illusion, I'm still moving through the block. You can think of time as one big block, and on the block theory, all of us are present at all times, all the time. And on the A theory, we move through time. Well, as far as this argument goes, it doesn't really matter one way or the other, because we're still moving, experiencing one of these at a time. So then what that means is that movement through the block, has it been going forever, or does it have a starting point? In other words, does the movement through the block for the world overall, has it been going forever, or does it have a starting point? Because this idea of an illusion, it's not really important for this argument, because we're still clearly living in a movement through the block of time. So the question becomes, well, is the universe, or the world eternally old, or does it have a beginning? Well, if you would say that it's eternally old, then what we're talking about is infinity, right? The concept of infinity. Infinity is a weird thing in mathematics, and it's puzzled many people for a long time, and we've actually, as a race, as mankind, we've put a lot of effort in trying to understand this outrageous concept of infinity, you know. And so one way for us to kind of start wrapping our minds around it today is I want you to imagine that you've got a barrel, and inside the barrel are apples. Okay? Now this is an infinite barrel of apples. Okay? There's an infinite barrel of apples, and here you are, and you decide to number all of the apples from, you know, every one of them has a number. And so they would be numbered like this. The basic counting numbers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You know, the familiar numbers. Okay? Now, some numbers are odd and some numbers are even, right? So 1 is an even number, 3 is an even number, 5 is a odd number. 1 is odd, 3 is odd, 5 is odd, 7 is odd, and the other ones, those are even numbers, right? Okay, so if there's an infinite number of apples in there, let's say that you decide to take out all of the even numbered apples. So you decide, hey, the even numbered apples, they've got to go. I don't want them in the barrel anymore. I'm going to put them in another barrel. Maybe I'm going to sell the even numbered apples to somebody else. So you take out an even number of apples. Okay? Well, all right, let's do the subtraction there. Let's see how many apples you have left. Okay, so you started and you had infinity apples, and you subtracted out all the even apples. Well, how many apples did you subtract out? Well, how many even numbered apples are there? Well, there's actually an infinity of even numbered apples. And so how many would you have left? Well, you would have the odd numbered apples, right? How many odd numbered apples are there? Well, there's infinity odd numbered apples. So that seems a little bit weird, doesn't it? Just wait, it gets weirder. Let's say you decide to take all of the apples out. So you start with infinity of apples. You subtract all of the apples, which is also infinity. And since you took all of the apples out, you now have 0 apples. So look at that. You can subtract the same thing from the same thing and get 0 or infinity. There's an infinite difference in the answers you can get. It gets worse. Let's say that you started with an infinite barrel of apples and you decided to subtract, let's say, all the ones after 100. So you say, you know, I'm going to count out 100 and then I'm going to pull out all the ones other than that first 100. Okay, well, how many come after 100? Well, an infinity come after 100. So how many do you have left? 100. You can literally subtract the same thing from the same thing and get any number you want when it comes to this infinite barrel of apples. Okay, so mathematics that's been, you know, created to work with infinities is what's called transfinite arithmetic. Transfinite arithmetic. And it even includes the idea, there's proofs that like some infinities are bigger than others, but the infinities in this barrel of apples wouldn't include any of that. They would all be the same size. And that's just like a way out there idea. But one of the things about transfinite arithmetics is all of this, subtraction is a no-no. It's just against the rules in mathematics to do subtraction with infinities of any size, because this is irrational. You know, subtraction has to have a meaning. It has to be a meaningful concept. So if I say 4 minus 3, that equals 1, that means something, because what it does to take 3 away from 4 means something. but it loses all meaning here, and it becomes totally irrational and meaningless and just illogical. Okay? And so the thing is, if this barrel of apples existed in the real world, then you could do these operations. So like in mathematics, we just make it against the rules because it doesn't make any sense. But in real life, it would have to exist and have to actually be something. For anything to exist, it has to have an identity that makes it what it is. And the identity of this barrel would be such that you could do these things, but you can't possibly do these. So there are some things that are just illogical, and therefore they're impossible not because there's a rule against it, but because it's just meaningless. It doesn't even mean anything. So for example, the classic example, let's say that you and your friends are in a house. This is the example I like to use. And outside the house, so there's 3 of you in the house. And one of you says, there's a cat outside. And another one says, there are no cats outside. Right? Well, you can't tell if there's a cat outside or not unless you open the door and look, right? But let's say that your third friend says, you're both right. How can you both be right? So you can tell that your third friend is dead wrong without even looking, right? You don't even have to look, because the idea that there's a cat and there's no cats is just meaningless. It's just nonsense. Another way of thinking about it is to say, hey, young man and woman who are just married, I hear you're having a baby. And at the same time, she says yes and he says no. Would you feel like you had an answer to your question? Probably not, because that's just meaningless nonsense. Unless, they're trying to be funny or something. Okay, so let's beat this down with a few more examples. Let's think about it this way. Here's the sun, and then here's the earth. Well, the sun's a lot bigger, right? Okay, and the earth orbits the sun. And then further out, here's a pretty big planet named Jupiter. And Jupiter orbits the sun too. Look at my great orbits. Okay, and let's say that just for as a thought experiment, let's say that Earth has been orbiting the sun since infinity past. And let's say that Jupiter has been orbiting the sun since infinity past. Okay, so Jupiter's orbit, how long would it be? Well, since it's got to go further, let's just say for the thought experiment it goes at the same speed. So Earth takes 1 year, and then Jupiter, we'll just say, takes 2 years. 2 years to do this one orbit. So every time every time Earth makes an orbit, Jupiter's made a half an orbit. And for every Jupiter orbit, Earth has made 2 orbits. So Earth basically orbits the sun twice as fast as Jupiter. Now in reality, those aren't the exact differences, although there are differences in the orbital speeds of rotation around our sun. But if they've both been orbiting since the infinite past, how many orbits have they completed? Well, they both completed infinite orbits. But mathematically, Jupiter's orbits must be half of those of the Earth. And so we run into another problem. It is mathematically required, due to the orbital speed, that whatever the orbits here should be 2 times these orbits. And yet they have to be the same. So you run into these logical problems. I'll give you one more. Let's say that there's a road, and on one side of the road is Jesus' house, and on one side of the road is the Heavenly Father's house, God the Father's house. Okay. And let's say that the Father every day counts. He's been counting down since the infinite past, from negative infinity. He's been counting one down every day. And on what day will he reach 0? Well, he'll reach 0 today. He'll also reach it yesterday. He'll also reach it tomorrow. He will literally reach 0 every day. Okay, so, which also doesn't make any sense, right? But let's say that, so he counts 1 per day. Now let's say that Jesus counts 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. So Jesus counts 2 per day. Okay, so, do you see the problem again? It's a similar problem. Okay? Not only that, another example, let's say you've got this guy, they say Methuselah, the old guy from the Bible, Methuselah, and he's been living since the infinite past. So his age is infinity. He's very old. Okay, he's got a cane to help him walk because he's so old. And it's one of those canes with like the 4 prongs. And he's got a beard because he's old. And he's been keeping a diary. And he's been writing in his diary everything that happened every day since the infinite past. But he's slow. He's always been a slow, ever since he was, first started writing in the diary, he's been a slow writer. And he takes a very long time to record the events of each day. In fact, he takes so long that for every day, he writes 1 year. Every day takes him a year to write down. He's very careful. He wants to perfectly craft, the art of like what that day was really like. He wants you to feel it come through the words on the page. Okay, well so he takes a year to write down 1 day. So like for 7 days or 1 week, that would take him 7 years to write it down. But if he's infinitely old and there's an infinite number of days, then did he have time to complete the diary? He would have to have time to complete the diary. So this is another way of pointing out this problem. Okay? And so this is the classic example, and the favorite example of everyone is, what if you had a hotel, and it's the infinite hotel. And there's an infinite number of rooms in the hotel, and there's an infinite number of people in the hotel. And this is named after the mathematician David Hilbert, a German mathematician. So it's called Hilbert's Hotel. And what if you had an infinite number of people in the hotel? Alright? Well, you run into these problems. Remember our infinite barrel of apples. Like, let's say all of the odd-numbered rooms decide to check out. Well, you've got all of the even-numbered rooms, which is still infinity, and it's still the same amount of people in the hotel. So the hotel, you could have an infinite number of people check out because of all of the odd-numbered rooms, but the hotel would still have the same amount of people in there because you still got the same infinity of the even-numbered rooms. So you could just like move everyone around and the hotel's still full. Or reverse the process. Let's say an infinite number of people show up. You could move everyone around and create an infinite number of empty rooms. Or you can have an infinite number of infinitely large buses show up and still fit them all in the hotel. Okay, and so this is why mathematicians and philosophers say that infinity is a great idea. You can think of potential infinity. It's a great idea to talk about in math, but if you talk about an actual infinity existing in the real world, that becomes a problem. So talking about infinity as a potential mathematical concept is great. We've been doing that. But there's certain things that just wouldn't make sense. But if they would have to be possible if it existed in the actual world, but they can't possibly be possible, you can't subtract the same number from the same number and get whatever number you want. So either you're going to say subtraction is meaningless, I'm pretty sure 5 minus 3 makes 2, then infinity is not something that can exist in the actual world. Okay? So that means, voila, that the universe, or time, not only is it not an illusion, remember we're moving through the block, but it can't be infinite in the past. There must be a beginning of time. Look at that. There must be a beginning of time, logically. And no amount of research would debunk that, because it's just pure mathematics. It's like if I told you, let's go up into the attic of your house and we're going to get a box and we're going to put 3 rocks in the box. And then you're going to go downstairs and you're going to wait 1 year. And then you're going to go back up there and look in the box. And what if you go back up there in a year later and it turns out there's 4 rocks in the box? What would you think? Maybe we forgot how many we put in there. Maybe we counted wrong. What you would never think is that the number 3 equals the number 4. If you just say, well, maybe the number 3 is the same thing as the number 4. That explains my observations, right? That I observed, 4 rocks in the block, 4 rocks in the box. But that's mathematically impossible. You and I both would agree to any theory to explain what happened before we'd say the number 3 is the same thing as the number 4. We would even say that, maybe the rocks can multiply. Maybe they had babies, which doesn't make any sense. More likely that we just, somebody snuck one in there, or maybe we forgot, But I would conclude anything, any outrageous theory before I start saying the number 3 is the same thing as the number 4. That's outrageous. Okay? So, there's just a bit of logical certainty there. Time must have a beginning. Well, then we go to the next question. Since we know time has a beginning, then the question becomes, did it have a cause? Did it begin with a cause? Or did it begin without a cause? And those are really the only options, right? It either began, something caused it to start, or it began without a cause. Well, to say that it began without a cause is to say that the universe just sprang into being out of nothing. And the classic, the ancient Greek philosophers put it this way. They said, out of nothing, nothing comes. Okay? You run into all sorts of problems when you start saying that things can happen for no reason at all. So, like, you could come home tonight, and here's your bed, right? And there could be a unicorn on your bed. Look at my unicorn. And the unicorn could be going number 2-zy on your bed. And why did that happen? Well, it happened without a cause. It just sprang into being and started going number 2 on my bed. You see, nothing literally has no properties. Like this marker has certain properties. It's white and black. It's about this long. It has a certain amount of marker juice in it. I have certain properties. I weigh a certain amount. I'm a certain height. I have personality defects. Everything that exists has certain properties that make it what it is, that distinguish it from what it is not. So, for example, this is a refrigerator magnet. It has different properties from the marker. They're both made out of plastic, so that's a property they have in common. But the refrigerator magnet has a little magnet on it. It's got a spring and this clippy thing. And those are the properties that make it what it is. Well, nothing has no properties. So it can't specifically cause this or that. So if, in other words, like if things can pop into existence out of nothing, then anything can happen at any time for no reason at all. You could turn into a pink Cadillac, or a Tyrannosaurus Rex, or a Tyrannosaurus Rex could pop out of the ground in front of your house, and it could totally happen for no reason at all. Okay. Another example is, let's say you come home and you find that you've been robbed. And so you call the police. Hey, cops. You call the police and you say, like, my door's broken into my house. Boom, you know, the door's broken in, right? And my stuff's gone. I've been robbed. Somebody bad, you know, came in here and robbed my house. And the cops could say, well, now hold on, wait a minute. The fact that your door's broken and all your stuff's missing, that could have happened without a cause, for no reason at all, out of nothing. So that explains, you know, that explains it. And you can say, well, come on, cops, like, don't you think, you know, can we at least try to narrow down whether it happened for no reason at all? You know, how often does that happen? Well, see, nothing has no properties, so you can't even set odds on how often it happens. Okay? So you run into some real problems. It gets even worse. Because here's the classic philosophical example. What if you had a wall that was indestructible? Indestructible wall. And let's say that an unstoppable bullet also exists. Bullet. So here's the bullet. And let's say that an indestructible wall popped into existence out of nothing at all, and an unstoppable bullet also popped into existence out of nothing at all. What would happen if they collided? Well, the indestructible wall, because of its properties that make it what it is, it cannot be destroyed. Nothing can go through it. Whatever hits it, it would stop. But the bullet also has properties that make it unstoppable. And so classically in philosophy, we would say that an unstoppable force, meaning an immovable object, is a meaningless. Again, it's like saying, you know, 3 equals 4. Like it's just irrational. It's not that it's impossible, it's just that that's a meaningless thing. But we run into the same problem. If things can pop into existence out of nothing at all, there's nothing inherently wrong with this by itself. And there's nothing inherently wrong with the bullet by itself. And if things can pop into existence out of nothing at all, both of those could, because nothing has no properties, could pop into existence out of nothing at all. And then they could meet. But that's logically impossible. But it would have to be possible, but it can't be possible, so therefore we have to say that things cannot pop into existence without a cause. So it's very similar to the beginning of time thing. It's like there's nothing wrong with the infinitely large barrel of apples or the infinitely big hotel in and of themselves, but if they existed in the actual world, other things would have to be possible that are a problem. So therefore they can't exist in the actual world. It's the same thing here. Things popping into existence without a cause, that can't happen in the actual world, because if that was true, things would have to be possible that cannot possibly be possible. So therefore, something caused the beginning of time. Okay, now this gets interesting. Okay, so whatever caused the beginning of time, it's either a personal being, like a person, like when I say personal being, I mean like somebody, you know, or we'll say someone, or it's not a person, or like a thing. And those are really the only logically possible options. It's either a person or it's not a person. It's either, you know, It's either an it or personal. Okay, so, well, let's say that it's not a person. Well, all right. This cause of the world must exist. We've already shown that. Now we've got to ask ourselves, well, what is it? Something caused time to begin to exist. Well, is it infinitely old? Well, no, it can't be infinitely old. We're running the same old problem. Did it pop into being out of nothing? Well, no, we run into that problem. Well, all right, it must exist. Whatever it is has to exist on that old block theory. Remember the block theory of time? It would have to just transcend time so that it's not really moving through time like we do. You know, so remember on the block theory of time, 1981 was when I was born, and now it's 2020. In the future it will be, why can I do this math? 2981. And here I am right here. And I move through the block. That movement through the block of time that we all experience can't have been going forever. We run into these infinity problems. But for a thing that caused the universe to exist, it could exist, it has to exist, and the only possible option is it exists on that block theory where it doesn't wait for tomorrow to get here, but rather I'll just call it the cause of the universe. It just exists at all times at the same time. It doesn't move through the block like us. It's just at all locations at the block at the same time. That's the only way. I mean, it has to exist because we run into all these problems. Well, that's the only way it could exist. Well, okay. So what we say is, whatever the cause of the universe is, it transcends time. Or we could say it's timeless. Of course, it's not really timeless. It's at all times at the same time, but it's timeless in the way that we experience time, where we move through time and we wait for our experience of time wouldn't be relevant to it at all. So its properties are timeless. They transcend the ages, I guess. Okay, well, here I have a little magnet. Okay, and this magnet is not a person. I'm a person. This is a magnet. Okay, the magnet is not a person. It has certain properties, and one of those properties is that if it has a certain magnetic field that gets weaker as you go out from it, but if you bring it close enough to a piece of metal, it will. Let's see if we can see. I can even look. It has certain magnetic properties that, make it do what it does. It will. There are properties inherent to it that make it it causes a clinging to the wall or to the marker board because of its inherent properties. This thing doesn't have those properties, and so it cannot cause that clinging to the wall. And so inanimate objects, like things, they can cause stuff to happen, right? But whatever they cause is based on their inherent properties. So like this thing can like pinch my nose and ow! It has certain properties that make it do what it does, right? So for example, fire will burn stuff up because it just has certain properties that make it do that. Okay? That's just what it does because of what it is. Okay? Well, if the cause of the universe that must exist and must transcend time and is timeless causes the universe to exist, if it is not a person and a thing, then it would cause the universe to exist based on its properties. So it would have certain properties, just like this thing causes the pinching of my nose, whatever caused the universe to exist, if it's just a thing, if it's just an it, then its causing of the universe to exist would just be a result of its inherent properties. Okay? Well, those properties are timeless because it's timeless, so therefore it doesn't change, and those properties are true throughout all time, so therefore the universe would always be beginning. The universe would never be getting any older. It would just be timelessly causing the universe to timelessly, endlessly, always be in a perpetual state of the point of beginning to exist. And you wouldn't move through time because the thing that's causing the effect is timelessly causing the effect, so that the effect would be timeless too. Okay. That can't be because the universe began to exist and we're moving through this block of time. So how did, the movement through the block that we all experience, how is that possible? It cannot be possible if the thing that caused the universe is just a thing and not a person, because we would always be beginning to exist. The effect would be timeless too, or transcend time too. Okay? So we know that. Now, we don't really understand what kind of a personal being would have properties of making choices and doing things that kind of blows our mind, But we know this well enough, we understand this well enough to know it just can't be that. And so through process of elimination, all we're left with is somebody created time. Well, how about just the world? Somebody created the world, created the universe that we inhabit. Now, another answer you get a lot of times from teenagers is they'll just say, "Ooh, it was some sort of alien." It could have been anyone. Hopefully by this point you recognize that it couldn't have been anyone, because whoever it was couldn't have been an alien, because this being exists on this block theory. This block time. Transcends time. So think about it. This being is knows the future before it happens, not because he, she, it caused the future, but but because this being is actually there right now. Okay, so ask yourself this: where is this being at in time? It's at all times at the same time. Okay, ask yourself this: this being, if it wanted to run in a race, how long would it take to go from point A to point B? It would take 0 time, 0 seconds. It would take no time, because the elapsing of time is meaningless. So, this being that created is the cause of the universe, would you run into these issues? It would be everywhere, and at all times. So you begin to say, all right, what kind of being is this? And how long would this being take to, gather information, go out and observe? Wouldn't take any time. So it could observe all events, past, future, every location, everything in the universe. It could observe all of that. It would take any time. It doesn't take time to learn, figure out anything. So it's a know-it-all. So we begin to say this being is beginning to look a lot like God. Okay, here's a real kicker. and we'll end with this. There's a philosopher who lived a long time ago by the name of Laplace. You have to learn about him in math class. Okay, and he said, all right, what if there was a being, and it's just a hypothetical idea he came up with, what if there was a being that like knows every detail of every particle in the universe? Okay, so like this being could like know like where every atom is located in the universe. It could know all of the physical, atomic, chemical properties of every atom, every particle in the universe, and it can know the velocity of all particles. Then it would know when every rock was going to fall. It would know when every star was going to form. And it could even use that information to predict the physics and figure out whatever was going to happen in the future, every future event. It could work backwards and know every past event. Well, this being that created the universe, when the being created the universe, or when God created the universe, right? We're talking about God, obviously. When God created the universe, God would have set up everything according to some sort of, since it's a being and a personal being, it makes choices. So therefore this being has desires and plans, and this being must have created the universe with some kind of intentionality, some kind of goal, or some kind of plan. So in other words, what we're saying is there's a being that's planned out everything that's going to happen, and knew and saw all future events and planned for them in how the universe was created in the first place. So that when you feel like, man, God really helped me today, well, in theory, God could have always known you'd need that help and provided for it in the very creation of the universe as a plan from the get-go. Unless, of course, you're mistaken thinking that, God wants... sometimes we mistakenly think that God's doing something that God's not. But the point is that this being would have made a comprehensive plan for all future events in the very creative act, and therefore have planned out, have thought about everything ahead of time, and been ready for everything. So if you don't call that God, a being that plans out every day of your life, has a plan for the universe, the question becomes like, well, what do you call it? Now, one thing we haven't addressed in this video is this a good being or an evil being? And so to address that question, we would have to look at other stuff, other arguments, and other ways that, this God that must exist has revealed himself. And then there's even other philosophical arguments we could bring in to resolve this question. But nonetheless, all we wanted to do in this video was introduce you to a classic argument for a creator God. Hopefully it's been fairly easy enough to follow so far. So without further ado, thank you for your time.